Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Politics Unplugged, the show where we tear down walls between theory and reality so you can catch politics as it really happens. My name is Rosa.
And I'm Andy. Hello, everyone. Today we're here to talk about a deep, unbroken conversation on populism. What is, why it works in some places and in others no, and how we can study rigorously.
First, we will go through Latin America. We will look at some countries in Europe and maybe even Asia. Zoom in on three main cases, which are Brazil, Spain, and Sweden, and maybe occasionally even drop in on the Philippines and Italy for some extra color and insights. We'll apply institutionalist, structuralist, and culturalist lenses, sketch out a full comparative design, and end with honest methodological reflections.
So grab your coffee or your popcorns or even a evening tea so you can listen to it. And let's get started. First we're gonna make a definition of what is populism. Before we wander far, let's define our terms. And I think, in my words, populism is a style of politics centered on antagonistic relationship between the pure people and the corrupt elite, often delivered through a charismatic leader, of course. And in here, I want to make a space, and at this point, to mention that I just read a very good book called The People versus Democracy. Did you hear about that book?
No, I haven't actually. What's it about?
It's about the book basically argues that democracy is the way that we think of it, like as elections plus freedom and rights and that stuff, and not just in the usual places we think of. He says that in everywhere, even in countries like the USA, the UK, and across Europe, liberal democracy is under very danger. And what's populism do it with all that? Well, populists simplify everything, and I think they say like, you're the people and you have been betrayed, and I filed the corrupt elite for you. And I think that's like very powerful and at the same time super dangerous, because once in power, many populists don't play fair, and they start like dismantling democratic institutions and discrediting judge and journalists and turning like the people into a narrow group, often excluding immigrants and minorities.
That's very well explained of you. I also think that populism includes some key traits, such as managing framing, which is they just say, okay, these people are good, these people are evil, these people are the elite, these people are not. So they're really putting you in a box. They're also, another trait is charismatic appeals are really direct, but they're often bypassing institutions via social media, which can be really dangerous because not all the people look at news sites anymore, but they get a lot of information on social media, and sometimes this is not true. Another key trait is polarizing rhetorical, like where they are saying we are the real nation and they are destroying it without really giving a good explanation.
Yeah, of course. I think that's very dangerous. And at the same time, left-wing populism emphasizes with redistribution and anti-austerity. Like in Podemos, that is a case of study that we're gonna analyze in one moment. And while right-wing often stresses nationalism and anti-immigration.
And whatever its ideology, populism feeds on crises. For example, economic shocks, corruption scandals, cultural backlashes, but also, like Andy said, immigration, which is a really big problem, for example, in Europe in the last few years.
Yeah, of course. And for the research puzzle that we investigate, is a very profoundized question, because we wonder, why does populism flourish electorally in some democracies but not in others? And even when they share like structural factors, for example, inequality, media change, or institutional distrust. Why does, for some democracies, yes, but for others, no? What do you think, Rosa?
I think it really also depends on like the people in the countries. For example, we're looking at Brazil, Spain, and Sweden, and all the people who live there, they have also different ideologies about what they want and what they think is maybe good for their country, or maybe will flourish their like economic.
Yeah.
So I think that's also a really big point, something that really separates the forms of populism that these countries have experienced.
Yeah, of course. And that's a very good point to start. For our case election logic, we use the most different system design, as Rosa said. And let's start with Brazil. Brazil, as we know, it's a relative young democracy. So that has long struggled with corruption and inequality and violence, of course. And we are here to talk about a specific person named Jair Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro was a former army captain and longtime congressman who ran in 2018 as an anti-establishment outsider. And to Bolsonaro, the country was like governed for over a decade by the left wing and Workers' Party, which became heavily associated with major corruption scandals. And his campaign leaned heavily on nationalist and anti-leftist rhetoric and socially conservative values. Also, I think that he communicated directly with voters via social media, especially WhatsApp, and that's like super shock. I don't know,
Yeah,
like
I get that.
a president texting, the people. So yeah, that happened to Brazil. And also Spain. What do you think about Spain, Rosa?
I think Spain is really interesting because they have two different kinds of populism parties. First, they have Podemos, which is more the left-wing populism. Then they have Vox, which is the right-wing populism. Podemos was founded in 2024, and it was mostly a protest movement. They are very anti-elite and very critical of the EU economics policies. And they use the us versus the caste narrative a lot.
Yeah.
And Vox is, like I said, more the far-right populism party. They were founded just 4 years after. And they are really nationalist and really anti-immigration and socially conservative. They gained a lot of popularity because they were opposing the Catalan independence, the immigration, and the feminists. And after the 2008 global financial crisis, Spain endured a decade of austerity, soaring youth unemployment and repeated political scandals. So I think that's really when the two populism parties really came through, because they wanted to make a change and really wanted to maybe reconnect the people with more of the politics.
Yeah.
And they, since after the financial crisis and the political scandals, the two-party dominance in Spain really opened up.
Really?
And I think that was really a good time for first Podemos and after, just 4 years after, also for Vox to just get more of the people with them and more get known in the country.
Yeah, it's always the socially conservative, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, Sweden, the Sweden Democrats, as we know, typically Sweden is seen as a model of political stability and social democracy. But however, growing concerns over immigration and identity have reshaped its political landscape in the past decade. And talking about the Sweden Democrats, a right-wing populist party with roots in extremist movements, and they have rebranded toward mainstream acceptability. And these Democrats focus a lot on nationalism and cultural preservation and immigration control. And also, they emphasize with the Swedish values and oppose what they see as excessive multiculturalism. But I think Sweden Democrats only want the idea basically is no more people that is not Sweden.
Yeah, I also think that Sweden is one of the most segregated countries, mostly ethical, because I think it's really hard for immigrants in Sweden to really find a place in the community and in society.
Yeah, of course.
And also as a result of the discrimination, for example, like landlords and employers and teachers, they are not giving immigrants the same opportunity based on their ethnic background.
Yeah, of
so
course.
I think that's maybe a reason why it's becoming more popular in like Sweden, the Populism party.
Yes, of course. It gets strong.
Yeah.
For that.
You really see it
stuff.
coming up in the few years.
Yeah, I think in the case of Sweden, proportional representation plus cultural debate plus the immigration control is obviously gonna entry point for right-wing populism.
Yeah, you really see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in the case of Spain, it doesn't matter like if you're left or you're right. It's populism, and this ideologic oppositive both are populists.
So you also if you're not either left or right, there's always like a way, and they are both really different parties. So either if you're, for example, you're not really like the ideology of Podemos, maybe you're really a fan of Vox, and it's also like the populism that you're looking for in your government.
Yeah, populism is more about like style and strategy, and people versus elites, but it doesn't matter if you're left or right.
No, I think so too. Yeah, that's really good said.
And with Brazil, I think that the fault was the presidential system.
Yeah. Maybe.
What do you think? And maybe the fragment party structure.
Yeah, I think in Brazil, it's still quite hard with the party structure, also because they have a lot of parties.
Yeah,
so it's really hard to be like, a lot of parties have a lot of different ideologies. Mm-hmm. So it's quite hard to know which one you really like and which you want to vote for. So maybe that's why it's easier for extreme populism to rise.
Yeah, of course.
So the citizens see like there's a party who has a really strong like belief and that they want to vote for them. Yeah.
Yes. For Brazil. So let's move on to another idea.
The idea is if there are very different contexts yield similar patterns, our explanations may point to general mechanisms rather than unique histories.
Yeah, like in Brazil, right? Like we were talking about for example, let's start in South America. What do you think?
Yeah, in Brazil, for example, after around 2015, it suffered its worst recession in a century, and a mammoth corruption probe it's called Lava Jato. The trust in traditional parties really cratered after that. You can also really see it still in their government. A lot of citizens don't have a lot of trust anymore in the traditional parties that were earlier were really popular, but now really don't really have a lot of votes anymore.
Yeah, and I think in here the social media makes a lot of noise because in the case of Brazil, as we were talking about, these men use WhatsApp to networks to bypass the mainstream.
It's quite a weird form of marketing, I would almost say.
Also on social media, like Twitter, Facebook, I think it's very dangerous if you don't put the right information in that platforms.
I think on social media it's really easy because your posts, they don't really, or maybe at first look, they don't get like how do you call that? They're looking if they're like real or not, so it can be a lot of fake news, and it's really hard for some people, especially if your education isn't that high, that it's really hard for you to know if it's true or not. And I think that's quite hard with the talking and on social media.
Yeah, of course, and their communication style was like more polished than in Europe, for example, and target Facebook ads and that kind of stuff about crime and welfare. I think that it's not the way that the things will be managed. You know?
Yeah.
And well, additional to these cases, Rosa, I want to talk about Italy, just for mention.
Okay.
In Italy, there happened a particular thing that calls Italy 5-Star Movement, that is an anti-establishment direct democracy in online platforms, and then ally with the far right.
Okay, so a lot of politics, they're using social media, especially the far right politicians. They're using.
Kind of weird, right?
Okay, so it's almost a little bit like the same as it happened in Brazil, or no?
I think it's a little
maybe more
similar.
Yeah, okay.
But it not compares with Bolsonaro texting WhatsApps with the people. So yeah.
And I also saw we have something a little bit similar that happened in the Philippines, where we had a populist who was really tough talking on like the crime and drugs, but because of that he was bypassing human rights norms.
Wow.
And I think it maybe came out a little bit too late, or maybe the citizens didn't really like know this information, because he still won 39th of the votes in 2016, which is quite weird because it's actually illegal to bypass like human rights norms, and he still got a lot of votes, so people were still like behind
I think people vote for him because they were like scared about
maybe
all the things that maybe he only says and it doesn't even true. So.
Okay, next up we're going to do some theoretical framing. So let's map out our three lenses. We have institutionalism, party fragmentation, electoral rights, presidential against parliamentary, structuralism, economic inequality, globalization shocks, class-based grievances, culturalism, identity threat. Think about immigration and national culture, moral traditionalism versus liberal modernity, and media environment and echo chambers.
No single lens subsuffices. The real explanatory power lies in their interaction, I think. Like, for example, inequality matters more when media ecosystems amplify gibberish narratives.
Yeah, like maybe that's a little bit happening in the United States at the moment, where you only see one point of the news if you're only looking at one broadcast channel.
Yeah, one side of the story. Yeah.
And we're going to compare some our strategy and hypothesis. Our framework is the dependent variable.
Variable.
That's populist vote share, seat share, coalition inclusion, and our independent variables are fragmentation index, Gini, unemployment, immigration rate, trust in institutions, and lastly, media concentration.
Yeah, and also electoral commissions like World Bank or Eurobarometer or Latino Barometro, they, I think, are attack of social media analytics.
Yeah, I get that. Then let's go to our key hypothesis. Our first hypothesis is greater party fragmentation, does that help with higher populist success? The second hypothesis that we have is, does greater inequality or unemployment mean higher populist support? Our third is, does higher perceived cultural threat mean more right-wing populism? Our fourth is, does lower institutional trust mean more populism overall in the country?
I think I'm going to go with the first hypothesis, the greater party fragmentation, higher populist success.
Yeah, sounds like a good one. We can really look deeper into that one.
As we have said in the past, when you don't have a good structure of your political system, it's very easy for a populist to succeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. What hypothesis do you like more?
I think that's a really good one. I also like the one about the inequality and the unemployment, because I think if people maybe feel like they're not equal to each other, they really want to vote on a party that's maybe like specializing in that more and maybe like talking about it more.
Yeah. And I think populist people ignore cases where populists fail.
Of course. Yeah, I get that.
And it's like, no, it doesn't happen never. Yeah. And, well, the case selection trade-off. Let's talk about deep against breadth.
We chose breadth across systems, but lose deep country-specific nuances. And our final thoughts. So, what do we take away from everything that we just said right now? We think populism is a little bit like a chameleon. It really adapts to its like institutions, economics, cultures, and that's maybe also a reason why it's hard to counter, and a lot of countries have maybe tried it and it didn't work out.
I think populism is not bad. Historically, we have a very good populist like Barack Obama. He was a populist, and well, maybe some people are against him, and others are like, yeah, Obama.
Yeah, but he also did a lot of great things.
Yeah. In my opinion, he did. So there are cases when populists can be good to a democracy.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's also, especially for some countries, it's good to have a lot of different views.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like that many, as like in Brazil where you have almost 30 different parties. But it's good to have someone in your government or someone trying to get into your government who has a populistic view on your country. I think it can help with a lot of different things.
Yeah. And well, for our conclusion, well, for everyone is listening to this, embrace multicultural frameworks, mixed methods, and reflexivity about our own business. I think it's very important, and it's the main idea of the populism. And you know, the message is that democracy isn't something we can take for granted, even in countries where it's been stable for decades. It's very important to recognize that it's fragile, and we need to focus on this.
Yeah, I also think, like you said, sometimes even if it looks really stable, it can always be fragile. You don't
Yeah.
always know what's going to happen. Maybe there's going to be a pandemic happening or something like a war. So it's always, politics are always sometimes maybe hard to understand, and it's always fragile. It's always something you need to look out for.
Yeah, even if you don't think that it's going to happen.
Yeah.
In,
never know.
in countries like United States, when you see them stability and economic very good, so you don't imagine
No,
that
that's
that happened. Yeah, and it's kind of fun because we have a lot of examples in
Yeah.
in the world. So yeah.
Okay, with everything said, let's wrap up our journey into populism. We hope this sparked ideas for your own research, or maybe simply just give you a fresh lens, or just some information about populism you wanted to know.
Yeah. And it's very important that you'll listen to a lot of sources of information and don't take like fake news and more in politic topics.
Yeah. Try to really fact check your sources.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening to Politics Unplugged, and hope you enjoy the program and you like it.
And see you soon.
Yeah, goodbye.